narottamam naram chaiva narottamam devim saraswatam vyasam tato jayam udarayat dodayam udirayat. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our very means of conquest, one should sure offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead Narayan, unto Nar Narayan Rishi, the supremmost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and to Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Nasta praeshu abandreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati utama shloki bhaktir bhavati naistiki. Regular attendance in the Bhagavatam class and rendering service to the pure devotee. All that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed to nil. And loving service unto the personality of Godhead, who is praised with transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. Om Magana Timarandasya Janan Shalakaya Chakshuram Militam Jaina Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, and my spiritual master opened my eyes with the torch of knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisances unto him. Mukam karoti vachalam pangam langayate girim yakripatam aham bande shigurum dinataranam. I offer my respectful obeisances unto my spiritual master, deliverer of the fallen souls. His mercy turns the dumb into eloquent speakers and enables the lame to cross mountains. So today we are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 23. We're going to do verses 1 to 9. So we'll just read the English. Read the English? Okay. Would you like to start?
The cowherd boy said, O Rama, Rama, mighty armed one, O Krishna, chastiser of the wicked, we are being harassed by hunger, and you should do something about it.
Next. Back and forth.
Sukadeva Goswami said, thus entreated by the cowherd boys, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the son of Devaki, replied as follows, desiring to please certain of his devotees, who were Brahma's wives.
Text 3, Lord Krishna said, please go to the sacrificial arena where a group of Brahmanas learning in the Vedic injunctions are now performing the Agni Rasa sacrifice to gain promotion to heaven.
When you go there, my dear cowherd boys, simply request some food. Declare to them the name of my elder brother, the Supreme Lord Balaram, and also my name, and explain that you've been sent by us.
Thus instructed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the cowherd boys went there and submitted their request. They stood before the Brahmanas with palms joined in supplication, and then fell flat to the ground to offer respect.
The cowherd boys said, O earthly gods, please hear us. We cowherd boys are executing the orders of Krishna, and we have been sent here by Balarama. We wish all good for you. Please acknowledge our arrival.
Lord Rama and Lord Achyut are tending their cows not far from here. They're hungry and want you to give them some of your food. Therefore, Brahmanas, best of the knowers of religion, if you have faith, please give some food to them.
Text 8. Expect during the interval between the initiation of the performer of a sacrifice and the actual sacrifice of the animal. O most pure Manas, it is not contaminating for even the initiated to partake of food, at least in sacrifices other than the Sutramani.
In text 9, Ite Bhagavat Yachnam, Ite Bhagavat Yachnam, Shrindvato Pinashu Shruva, Shudrasa Purikarmano, Balasa Vidhamannina, Ite Bhagavad Vachnam Shrinvato Pinas Shushruva Shudrasa Buddhikarmano Baliyasa Vidamannina
Iti te bhagavad yachnam.
Ite te Bhagavad Vachnam Shrinvato Pina Shushruva
Shudrasa Bhuri Karmano
Mano
Balisha Vidhamanina.
Balisha Vidamannina
Iti te bhagavad yachnam.
Ite te Bhagavad Yachnam
Shrivanto Pina Shashrubuho
Shrinvato Pina Shushruva
Shrudasha Bhuri Karmano
Balisha Vidhamanina.
Balisha Vidamannina
Iti te bhagavad yachnam.
Te Bhagavad Yachnam
Srimanto apina shushrubuhu.
Karmano Balisha Vidhamannina Ite thus te they the Brahmanas Bhagavat of the Supreme Personality of Godhead Yachnam the supplication Srindarmana men translation and purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. Okay. Yet they refused to pay heed. Indeed, they were full of petty desires and entangled in elaborate rituals. Though purport. These childish brahmanas were full of petty desires such as desires to attain material heaven, and therefore they could not recognize the golden transcendental opportunity offered them by the arrival of Krishna's personal boyfriends. Presently, throughout the world, people are madly pursuing material advancement and thus cannot hear the message of the Supreme Lord. The Supreme Lord Krishna that is broadcast through the missionary activities of the Krishna consciousness movement. Times have hardly changed. Proud, materialistic priests are still prevalent on the earth. Hare Krishna. So it's interesting, chapter begins, the boys are telling Krishna that they're harassed by hunger. And it's interesting in Navavrajavahima, this pastime is described, and it's described that actually the cowherd boys, they weren't concerned about themselves, but they were concerned that Krishna was hungry. And they knew that if they would say to Krishna, "Oh, Krishna, are you hungry? Can we do something for you?" Krishna would say, "No, I don't need anything." So they knew that Krishna, he wouldn't do anything for himself. So they said, we have this burning hunger in our stomachs. Can you do something? So they weren't even concerned about themselves. They're actually concerned about Krishna. Therefore, they put on this facade that, "Oh, Krishna, there's a burning fire in our bellies. Can you do something?" So Krishna sent the boys to the Brahmanas who were performing this Vedic ritual. And there are certain strictures which actually said that a ritual should not be interrupted or disturbed. When I was reading this morning, I was just remembering the many times that I performed marriages in different places, and when you set everything up, the yagna shawl and decorating with flowers and fruits and bananas, and there's always little kids running around, and there's always a fear in the back of your mind that some kid's going to come up and take some of the fruit from the yagna shawl. So here the Brahmanas, it's described, they literally ignored the cowherd boys' request. And it's described also here that the cowherd boys, they actually knew the Shastra conclusion, and there are some injunctions that the offerings can be taken even though the yajna is not finished. So they were actually just in what they were saying. But the brahmanas could not hear that. And so it's interesting that there actually are different Vedic injunctions, and some of them seem contradictory. And so this is one, that a Vedic yajna should not be interrupted, and at the same time, here's Krishna's personal servants, the cowherd boys, are begging a little interruption so they could take some of the fruits and offerings from the yajna. So there's a type of contradiction there. And so how do you resolve those types of contradictions? It's interesting that someone asked Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur one time that why these kinds of contradictions are there in the Shastra and in the words and the writings of the Acharyas. So one nice example is there in the third canto, in which Srila Prabhupada, he says that after the age of 50, every man should take sannyas. And then in another place, Srila Prabhupada says, in the age of Kali Yuga, no one should take sannyas. And those statements are in the same canto, same chapter, same purport. So how do you resolve that? And Srila Prabhupada, he comments further on that, that if one is qualified, then he can take sannyas, if he actually has the qualifications. So there's many different types of instructions that you will see, and contradictory things. Sometimes Prabhupada would quote Chanakya Pandit, where he would say, women are less intelligent. And at the same time, in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, amongst women, I am intelligence. So why these contradictions are there? So Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he was asked this question, and his reply was very interesting and extremely deep. He said that these things that we perceive as contradictions, he said, on the liberated platform for a liberated soul, he sees there's no contradiction at all. There's no contradiction in those statements. And he said the Acharyas place these things in the Shastra, he said, to prevent the, how did he describe it? I don't know if he used the... Yeah, to protect the Shastra from the prying eyes of the non-devotee demons. To protect the Shastra from the non-devotee eyes of the prying demons. So, or non-devotees, or materialists. So here we see these Yajnik Brahmins, they had quite a materialistic mentality towards what they were doing, and they couldn't accept what the cowherd boys were saying. So they couldn't understand because of the material filter. So in the same way, if someone approaches Krishna consciousness with a material filter of material desire, or especially of envy, they won't actually be able to fully understand the essence of the teachings of Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, of the Vedic literatures. It'll be veiled. So those kind of statements are there for a purpose. And it's very important that they be understood in the proper light. Like Prabhupada used to say how we should read all his books. Very important to read all Srila Prabhupada's books. And very important to understand them in the proper mood, and with the proper understanding that we have to enter into the mood of bhakti to be able to understand Srimad Bhagavatam. We were just describing last night how Prabhupada said that if you try to understand Bhagavad Gita and you're devoid of pure bhakti, it can be like trying to taste honey by licking the outside of the bottle. You can maybe see the color, maybe have a little understanding, but to really understand the essence of the teachings of Krishna, Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, you need bhakti, because Krishna reciprocates from bhakti, and that reciprocation is that you can actually stick your finger in the honey jar and actually taste the honey. So therefore, the second verse of the Srimad Bhagavatam, it describes that how the Bhagavatam, its reality distinguished from illusion, and it says it's understandable by those who are pure in heart. So it's very important that our heart has to be pure. And when the heart is pure, one is able to apply that knowledge, as it says in that second verse, for the welfare of all. If our heart is not pure, and according to the degree that our hearts are tinged by material desire or covered by some type of envy, we may not be able to fully understand. And therefore we might read the Shastras and rather see, how is this for the benefit of everyone? How will this help this individual advance? How will this help that individual advance? One will think, okay, here's some verse I can pluck out of the Shastra and I can use this for my benefit. I can use this to maybe manipulate you or control you or lord it over you. And actually that happened in the Varnashram system. It's described by Srila Prabhupada how one class of men, they took advantage of their position in society and their knowledge to exploit the other orders of society. And Varnashram became very much polluted by this mentality that the Brahmins were the topmost and they could lord it over everyone else. That's not the function of Varnashram system. The Varnashram system is so that everyone can progress in Krishna consciousness, and the Brahmins are to apply Vedic knowledge to help everyone advance. So when we're reading Srila Prabhupada's books and we see these contradictions or see different statements, it's very important that we see them in the proper context, and extremely important that we don't use them to try and artificially put ourselves in a better position than others. Like it might say one should fast on Ekadasi. And I might think, okay, I'm doing a complete Nirjal fast on Ekadasi, but none of the other devotees are doing Nirjal fast on Ekadasi, so I must be the most advanced devotee in the room because I'm doing Nirjal. That's not the purpose. Missed the whole point. The knowledge is for the welfare of all. And you see how Srila Prabhupada, he was extremely expert in utilizing the philosophy of Krishna consciousness according to time and circumstance to encourage devotees to advance in Krishna consciousness from whatever platform that they were on. He was extremely pragmatic, that he would adapt according to time and circumstance. The one striking example was how when the first Jagannath deities were being carved, Shyamasundar, he described that he still had some attachment for smoking cigarettes. And so he was in a room carving the deities, and he had a package of cigarettes that he put down on one of the deities' arms, just as he's carving the other deity. This package of cigarettes is just sitting on either Jagannath or Balaram's arm. And Prabhupada walked in the room, and Shyamasundar realized that he'd left evidence on the deity's arm, and he said, "Oh, Srila Prabhupada, I'm so sorry." And Prabhupada said, "Think nothing of it." And then Prabhupada said, "Just smoke one less cigarette a day." He didn't chastise him or call him a fool or deride him, criticize him. He just acknowledged that, okay, he's made a mistake, and Prabhupada said, just one less a day. And you find many instances that where devotees are admitting they're having problems in Krishna consciousness, and Prabhupada would reply with things like, he would say, we all have these bad habits since time immemorial. He said, don't think so badly of it. He said, but rather just think how you can gradually advance. Like Prabhupada had this attitude of encouragement to help devotees to advance in Krishna consciousness. And also sometimes we might read these statements and might feel some kind of shame or guilt or confusion that we may be very fallen or helpless or hopeless. But those statements are not meant as judgments. They're meant to tell us what the highest standards are. Like Srila Prabhupada, he, in his books, he gave the most uncompromising, highest standards of spiritual life. And at the same time, in his interactions with devotees, he was always very accommodating and encouraging devotees to move forward. So those statements aren't there to judge us, but rather to allow us to know what the goal is, so that we can aim for that goal and find ways to move forward. And also sometimes there's statements that, especially in today's world, like one challenging thing in Srila Prabhupada's books for many people, you'll find statements which, it's described that women are less intelligent. And so how do you understand that or take that? So, and especially we live in a world which is plagued with misogyny, and sometimes men propagate that kind of an attitude, and in order to feel themselves more superior, and is very demeaning towards ladies. So how to understand those statements? So again, those statements are not meant as judgments. They are meant, again, to help us advance. And also, those statements, if you read all of Srila Prabhupada's books, you'll find those things are adjusted by statements which are telling us that actually women are intelligent. Krishna says, I am the intelligence. Amongst women, he says, I am intelligence. Prabhupada said, amongst all great men, there's always a great woman. So you'll find many statements like that. And Srila Prabhupada, one time, he was riding in a car. He was in the front seat, Jamuna, Gurudas, and a couple other, there's some sannyasis who were packed in a car, and Prabhupada quoted something from Chanakya Pandit. Oh, Chanakya Pandit said women are less intelligent. And Jamuna said that Srila Prabhupada turned to her and said, women are less intelligent, aren't they, Jamuna? And Jamuna replied, yes, Srila Prabhupada, whatever the Guru says, that's absolute, it's true. And Prabhupada said to her, no. He said, you are not a woman, you are a Vaishnavi. You are not a woman. So if I think I'm a man, I'm less intelligent. If you think you're a woman, you're less intelligent. I may be a spirit soul in a male body, you may be a spirit soul in a female body, but we're actually spirit soul. Those are material designations, but we are spirit souls. And so those statements might apply to someone who is in a bodily concept of life. Like it's described that men who do not hear and chant the glories of the Lord are compared to hogs, dogs, camels, and asses.
Sounds a lot worse than less intelligent.
Exactly. So there's tit for tat. So this past time, we see the Brahmins missed the mark. That they, here comes a request from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and they're so absorbed in their fruitive activities, they just couldn't hear. Whereas we're going to read how the wives of the Brahmins, they had heard about Krishna. They'd never actually seen Krishna or associated with Krishna, but it's described by the Acharyas how the village where the sacrifice was going on, there were different merchants who would come, little people selling their fruits and grains, would come to the different villages, and some of them would come from Vrindavan, and wherever they went, they would tell about all the wonderful things that were going on with this wonderful boy, Krishna. And so the ladies in this village, the wives of the Brahmins, had heard all about Krishna from the different people that would come through their village selling different things. And they were so much attracted. And so when they heard that these two boys, that's Krishna and Balaram, when Krishna and Balaram sent the boys to the to the wives of the Brahmins, they did not hesitate in the least. They said, wow, this is our opportunity to render some service to this amazing Krishna. They just dropped everything on the spot and went to serve Krishna. And that's the goal of life, to serve Krishna with that kind of love and devotion. And it's described how the Brahmanas, seeing that, how their wives had surrendered immediately, that they realized their folly. And it's described later in this chapter how the Brahmins, they said, to hell with our Brahminical culture, to hell with our Vedic sacrifices, our Vedic knowledge, because we missed an opportunity to serve the personality of Godhead. And it's described that they accepted their wives as their gurus after that. So materialistic consciousness to greater or lesser degrees, that can actually block us from getting a full understanding of Krishna. Especially pride and envy are very, very detrimental. To think oneself better oneself, to criticize others. Spiritual consciousness is just the opposite. It's to appreciate everyone. I'm just going to ask you, can you turn to the person next to you? Two ladies can turn towards, three and two at the back. Say something to appreciate to the person or persons next to you. Just quickly. Okay, if you haven't switched already, please switch. Or just to the other, just in your pair, you should both have exchanged. Okay, I'm going to just maybe stop you there. How does that feel? What's the feeling? Where do you feel it? Heart. Feel it in your heart. Something's happening in your heart when you appreciation. Hypothetically, remember a time maybe when you felt critical towards someone, when you were fault-finding someone, when you were thinking you were better than someone. How did that feel? Negative? Where do you feel that?
Heart.
In your heart? Think you feel in your heart? Probably feel your heart closing down. So pride and envy, material desires, it shuts the heart down. It shuts the heart down. And in the Vedas and in modern science also acknowledge between the heart and the brain, I think it's, the Vedas described as something like 40,000 neurological pathways that go to the brain from the heart. And in modern science, they actually acknowledge a similar figure, something in the neighborhood of 50 to 60 to 70,000 neurological paths going from the heart to the brain. So the heart is a very important part of our intelligence, and Krishna describes in the Bhagavad Gita how one is enlightened from within the heart. However, if we develop the opposite kind of material mentality where we have pride or envy or critical or lording it over, it actually shuts that part of the transmission to our higher self down. We can't actually access that heart knowledge when you're envious or critical. And when you have this attitude of gratitude, appreciation, respect, kindness for others, that actually opens the heart up. And Bhaktivedanta Maharaj gave this really nice class on this once, and he was describing how appreciation and gratitude, it's the gateway emotion to spiritual emotions. Because ultimately, we're trying to understand, what is it, what were these cowherd boys, what do they feel towards Krishna? What do the gopis feel towards Krishna? What are the Mother Yasoda and the cowherd men and women, what kind of emotions are they feeling towards Krishna? And Nectar Devotion, it paints a whole wide, colorful spectrum of all these ecstatic, emotional ecstasies. And how can we ever understand those? How can we ever understand those? So intellectually, you can't really understand them, but we can begin to understand them by the process of bhakti. By the process of hearing, we can appreciate, and by developing this attitude of gratitude and appreciation and respect for others, it begins to open our heart up so we can move towards experiencing spiritual emotions. And again, that is actually the ultimate goal of Krishna consciousness, is to develop love for Krishna. And love for Krishna is not something separate from love and respect for everyone. And in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, you should try to learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master, render service to him, inquire, and he can impart knowledge unto you. Upadikshanti te gyanam, it's described. He'll actually initiate knowledge unto you. So his spiritual master blesses you with spiritual knowledge from within the heart. And the next verse in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, and when one has understood that truth, one will see that all beings are in me, that I am in them, and they are in me. In other words, one will see that every living entity, every plant, every animal, every spirit soul is very dear to Krishna. Krishna is in their heart. And the fruit of that knowledge, the behaviors and consciousness that will come from actually having that knowledge, is that we will have the utmost respect for everyone. And contrary to that, if we don't fully develop that knowledge, and to the degree that we still have gross or subtle envy, gross or subtle material desires, we may not be able to fully understand that. And therefore, sometimes we don't actually see everyone as equal or as spirit souls. Like sometimes we understand Vedic culture, Vedic etiquette, and even sometimes there are seminars on Vedic etiquette. And so I might pass Bhakti Shastri, and I might know all the Vedic etiquette, but somehow I may still find myself being critical or envious or saying harsh things to people who are very close to me. So there can be that disconnect between my intellectual realization of the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, of what it is and how it should manifest, and there might be a gap between how I'm able to actually apply it in all circumstances. And again, that's where the process of sadhana bhakti requires some work, I guess described it. We're nourishing this bhakti lata bij, and the work is sometimes there's weeds that sprout along with our devotional creeper, and it's important to recognize those weeds and pull them out. And it's also described that sometimes the weeds, they may even look like the creeper. If you garden, does anyone here ever have a vegetable garden? There's a very amazing thing when you grow vegetables. Whatever vegetable you're trying to grow, when it's first coming up, there'll be a type of weed that looks almost identical to what you're trying to grow. And sometimes it's hard to know which one to pick, and sometimes you might pick what you're trying to grow. So in the process of sadhana bhakti and trying to advance, sometimes there can be subtle weeds. We might think that, okay, I understand this about the philosophy that I'm a Brahmin, and Brahmins are supposed to be the head of the society, so maybe I'm a pretty good person, and get a little bit of false pride. Those weeds are always there trying to interfere with the growth of our devotional creeper. That's why it's so important to hear Srimad Bhagavatam, understand Srimad Bhagavatam, understand the right mood in understanding Bhagavatam, that it's not for me to attain some position, but it's for me to attain love for Krishna and all his creatures and devotees and everyone. to see it in that light and learn to apply it in that light. And we can understand that. Is it easy to always apply that? No, it's not, because we have a material conditioning, and that material conditioning, as Prabhupada said, it's been since time immemorial. He said once, it's not surprising that we have material desires. It's not surprising we have desires for prestige and distinction. And Prabhupada said, because you've been conditioned since time immemorial. However, as Prabhupada describes in the 14th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, that by practice one can develop a spiritual consciousness. And by learning one can see, okay, what part of my consciousness is, in the lower modes of material nature, passion and ignorance, critical, fault-finding, envy. What part of my consciousness is in the mode of goodness, appreciating others, appreciating their qualities and service, and also, it's not so much about suppression of these negative qualities. It's actually about trying to understand the godly qualities, understanding them, trying to see how they act, trying to see it in advanced devotees, and realizing that there's a higher taste there, just like we were just experiencing, how when you appreciate, it's actually uplifting. You feel this in the heart. And as opposed to being in the material consciousness, we experience how it's actually stifling. So actually sometimes rather than trying to control a mind, if you just think, okay, how much of the day am I in that higher consciousness where I have gratitude and appreciation? And how much of the time do I have a critical, negative, envious attitude? And that includes even being critical of yourself. That can also be detrimental to your spiritual life. You can observe that you have qualities you want to improve, but you don't have to be critical. You just have to note it and try and advance. So by measuring that, just trying to gauge, okay, where am I during the day? Some people even will journal. And you're naturally going to spontaneously gravitate towards the spiritual side because the experience is so much better. And so Srimad Bhagavatam, it's giving us so much information on the spiritual reality and the practical application. And here we see how the Brahmins, they missed the mark because of their obsession with, Prabhupada described here, they were thinking about, like, we do this perfectly, we go to the heavenly planets. And it sort of was covering them. But when they saw that the devotion of their wives, they realized, we made a mistake. And so they made us a correction there. And so from the Bhagavatam, we can learn from the mistakes of others. We can learn what the goal is and therefore develop that desire and attitude to move towards the ultimate goal, which is to develop love for Krishna and all his devotees. So I'm going to stop there if anyone has any questions or comments. Prabhu.
Thank you for this session. My question is, what if you have a material desire and you know if this desire, if Krishna approves of this desire, it's going to help me a lot in my spiritual advancement? How to deal with that kind of...
Sorry, are you saying if you have a desire?
If you have a desire, it is, let's say it's materialistic, but you know that if this desire gets fulfilled, it will help you in spiritual life.
If you have a desire that will help you advance in spiritual life, then it's not materialistic. Let's give an example. Kardama Muni, he performed great austerities. The Lord appeared before him, offered him a benediction. He could have asked for liberation. Prabhupada said that he could have asked for liberation, but he said, my dear Lord, I think I need a wife of like disposition. So you might think, oh, Kardama Muni, you're Maya. Many years ago, and still some places today, if a brahmachari wants to change ashrams, the other brahmacharis say, Prabhu, you're in Maya, Why are you betraying the brahmachari ashram? But Krishna didn't say, Kardama Muni, you're Maya. Just, he said, Kardama, well, actually, Swayambhuva Manus, he's coming here in a few days, and his wife actually has a crush on you. I mean, his daughter. His daughter had a crush on him, desiring to marry him. So Krishna, he arranged the fulfillment. So one may need to enter into that ashram for his spiritual advancement. So the process of Krishna consciousness, it's not a process of abnegation, it's a process of spiritualizing everything, of turning matter into spirit. So if I just want to get married for my sense gratification, that's definitely material. That may not benefit my spiritual life. That may be a deep, dark well. But if one wants to enter into Grahastha ashram because he might have some desires, but he realizes I need a partner to help me progress in spiritual life, and that's my goal, then you can spiritualize that. As Prabhupada said, that whatever you have in this world, it's like zeros, but you simply have to put a 1 in front. So we may have desires, but we have to see, how can I spiritualize that? How can I utilize that in Krishna's service? So that's the important point, to add Krishna, to make sure that we're doing this for the satisfaction of Krishna. Any other questions or comments? Mm-hmm.
Earlier you said that pride and envy blocks spiritual advancement and it makes your heart hard.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say it is in that condition right now, so how can we jumpstart it back?
By appreciating. You make that move, and just think of, if you're feeling that envy or pride, just measure what's my consciousness like when I'm doing that, and what's it like when I'm actually appreciating and humble. I like to look at there's a photograph, a painting in Chaitanya Charitamrita of Ramachandra Puri. Does he look happy in that picture? It looks like the most miserable person. It looks like a what?
It looks like Scrooge.
A Scrooge, yeah. So we don't want to be like Ramachandra Puri. And again, we may have residual remnants of that in our consciousness, but we can just keep moving forward. And appreciation is so important to have that attitude. And sometimes we might not actually have the envy or the critical nature, but it's very easy to take things for granted. And sometimes when we take things for granted, we can gradually glide towards being critical. But therefore it's important to realize that we need to make that a practice to be appreciative and have gratitude for everything and everyone around us. Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj used to say you should cultivate the attitude of gratitude. And it's something you have to cultivate, and that's a part of the Bhakti Lata Beach. That's going to nourish your creeper, but we have to put that energy in.
Prabhu, you also mentioned that we should not be critical to ourselves either. So then that means we should be appreciative to ourselves.
You should appreciate your own qualities. Everyone is created by Krishna, very unique individuals with unique qualities and talents, and we should try to utilize those in Krishna's service. There's a difference between a criticism and a critique. Criticism is I'm putting you down. A critique might be, I can see something that maybe I can give you some advice to help you progress. That's a critique. So critiques are actually beneficial. So we can critique ourselves, but we shouldn't criticize. We can look for ways to advance as a critique. So in that sense, we're not putting ourselves down, but we're seeing how we can advance by critiquing. Because when you start to focus on the negative, internally, it just becomes stifling. Becomes like you become locked into that. Whereas making a self-critique, you see how you can improve. Yeah, this is true.
I just wanted to confirm this aspect. You mentioned about how the reason why we have contradictions in Shastra and Bhakti Vinod says that to prevent the prying eyes of non-devotees.
Mm-hmm.
So, is it just that, let's say if everything was perfect, then they would be more critical of Shastra, or how? I just wanted.
What I see is some people, sometimes they approach Krishna consciousness with an impure heart or impure motives, and they'll start to see things, maybe it's contradictory, and they'll start to criticize, and they'll think, well, this is just something material. And they'll give up Krishna consciousness. So somehow they're not quite ready because they have this critical attitude. Whereas one who approaches with a pure heart will see, okay, I may not understand this, but I understand, I have faith in Srila Prabhupada, that he's a pure devotee, I have faith in his books. I may not understand this, therefore I'm just going to keep reading, or I'm going to ask someone, what does this actually mean? And then you'll be able to overcome. I remember when I first came to Krishna consciousness, I was never quite bothered by those kind of statements. And my experience was that reading Srila Prabhupada's books in the beginning, it was like putting a jigsaw puzzle together, and I didn't have the box to know what the picture was. And as I put the pieces together, I could understand, okay, that's the reason that's said that way. It came together as I understood the whole picture, the philosophy, a lot more. So if we approach it with a mood of trying to understand with humility and be inquisitive, things will come into proper perspective in our minds. Whereas if we're critical, we won't get the whole picture. Okay, maybe we should end there. Thank you very much for your attention. Hare Krishna, Hare Rama.